Colleghi, buon pomeriggio. Riprendiamo.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd suggest that we resume our work and let me thank you all very much indeed for your efficiency this morning. We were able to explore in detail a number of very important issues and we were also able to adopt a very significant opinion on the basis of a clear majority. I would therefore suggest that we now turn our attention to item 7 on our agenda. And as you know, this point is a thematic debate on the conference on the future of Europe, dealing with equality as a building block for European democracy. The plenary session, the inaugural session of the Future of Europe, took place on the 19th of June in Strasbourg. Our committee, the Committee of the Regions, is represented by its president, who is a member of the conference's executive board, and we are also represented by a delegation made up of 18 representatives, and they participate in the conference plenary. Now, pursuant to a decision taken by the executive board, on the 19th of July, the Committee of the Regions will also appoint a further 12 additional members of the plenary, 6 elected representatives from regional authorities, as well as 6 representatives elected from local authorities. The next meeting of the conference plenary is due to take place on the 22nd and 23rd of October. And the working groups are expected to meet before the plenary or on the margins of it. The first 2 European panels representing citizens worked in Strasbourg over the last weekend. And as you know, our commission, the CIVEX Commission, is contributing to the conference with a standing point in all of the meetings of the conference. All of the discussions which take place will feed into the contribution of our committee to the conference, and I'd therefore like to invite you to participate actively in these discussions and also to ensure that you can involve your respective constituencies in the citizens' dialogues. The Committee of the Regions Administration is at your disposal to provide you with any information or support which you might require. Further information on the conference is available in the document on related activities. Now, turning to today's debate, we are going to be focusing on equality as a building block of European democracy. Equality, alongside democracy and human rights, constitutes one of the values which represents the cornerstone of the European Union. These are elements which are, of course, linked and interdependent, and that means that none of them can exist in the absence of one or the others. To bear witness to the importance of these values for the future of Europe and the future of the European democracy, values and rights, law, rule of law and security is one of the 9 issues for discussion proposed in the framework of the Conference on the Future of Europe. Discussion is, of course, encouraged, particularly discussion about how the European Union can provide support to ensuring the equality of all citizens, promoting justice and inclusiveness and equality, irrespective of any possible grounds for discrimination. We have a number of distinguished speakers with whom we shall be discussing how local and regional authorities can work together to promote inclusive democracy in their constituencies whilst addressing the obstacles to participation which are based on inequalities. I would therefore like to start by giving the floor to the first 2 speakers for 8 minutes each. Firstly, Joaquín Almunia, who's a former member of the European Commission, and he is a member of the Committee of the Regions High-Level Group on European Democracy. And after him, I shall give the floor to Léonie Martin, who is the president of the Young European Federalists. Mr. Almunia, the floor is yours.
Grazie, Presidente. Let me speak in English.
Thank you for inviting me to this debate. It was a pleasure to exchange views with the plenary of the Committee of the Regions before the summer break, and now it's of course a pleasure for me personally to exchange views with CIVEX, with your committee. But I have to warn that my opinions are personal opinions because I cannot engage at this juncture the high-level group. After our discussions trying to focus our work to fulfill the mandate we received from the Committee of the Regions, and looking at the agenda of the Conference of the Future of Europe, the high-level group analysis so far has been general discussions about the democracy, about how the local and regional authorities have to participate and to be active players in this democracy, in this democratic functioning. The draft of our contribution to the committee will start being discussed by the high-level group in November, and we expect the final adoption of this opinion on December the 7th. In the meantime, let me give you, in a nutshell, my ideas on inclusive democracy, equality, and fundamental rights. Those, as you said, President, are central values in our idea of Europe. After 7 decades since the beginning of our integration, we can be proud because the EU is the best place in the world when we check how our reality compares with any other part of the world regarding the fulfillment of these values. But we cannot be complacent at all. Social exclusion in the EU affects 1 out of 5 European citizens, according to Eurostat, and it is unequally distributed within the 27 members. The highest levels can be found in Southeast Europe, Romania, Bulgaria, Greece, the 2 biggest Mediterranean countries, Spain and Italy, and 2 Baltic states, Lithuania and Latvia. Indeed, the levels differ within every member state. The main sources generating exclusion are single-parent and unstructured families, youth unemployment, the so-called NINIs, youngsters without jobs or education, precarious jobs, migrants without papers, elderly people with low levels of pensions, linked in all these groups with low levels of education. Our treaties and the Charter of Fundamental Rights are very clear and explicit about the values a social markets economy. Equality is one of the most important ones. According to them, according to the treaties, we Europeans must fight against social barriers, inequalities, and any kind of discrimination. But so far, EU policies are not very relevant and efficient in this regard. Despite the conclusions reached in social summits, such as the recent one held in Oporto, the concrete results are very scarce. Being honest, based on the experience we all have so far, we fear that the communication recently issued by the Commission, mentioned in your paper for this discussion, can disappoint us in terms of the real impact. To a big extent, the authorities to cope with such challenges are national, regional, and local. Subnational levels of government, regional and local, are usually directly in charge of those policies, depending on how every member state internally distributes the competences. The institutional and economic capacities of the different member states are not the same, we all know this, and solidarity mechanisms are not strong enough in the EU. Moreover, access to social services and benefits, as defined by national social systems, are not well distributed within their populations. Middle classes benefit more than the weakest groups, and a number of regions are far below their national average. Our welfare state needs reforms to better distribute their impact. And the fight against social exclusion and discriminations must be considered as a priority. I would like the Conference of the Future of Europe to support that the EU must strengthen its capacity to put into practice our goals in those areas. And given that the high-level group has decided to focus our contribution on the crisis of our democracies, we are looking at the issue from two different perspectives. On the one hand, we must think that what can be done from the point of view of the functioning of our democracies at all government levels, with a special attention to some cases where basic values and principles are being questioned. At the same time, we must analyze what the regions and local authorities can do to improve their role within the EU institutions as a contribution to overcome this crisis. From the perspective of the crisis of democracies, the lack of inclusiveness is at the origin of a negative feedback loop between social exclusion and political participation. Participation in electoral processes and in public activities at large is lower among the sectors that suffer higher degrees of social exclusion. Social exclusion usually implies political exclusion. And the lower are the levels of political participation, the worse are the quality standards of our democracies. Therefore, we are confronted to a vicious circle, because low levels of electoral turnout are usually associated with a scarce participation in other activities, such as public consultation or civic assemblies, what we denominate participatory democracy or deliberative democracy. Populisms take advantage of this with demagogic or simplistic messages that further deteriorate the functioning and the quality of our democracies. Therefore, inclusiveness and lower inequalities are relevant objectives not only for social reasons, but also as a necessary component of stronger and dynamic democracies. Up to now, many of the responses to cope with this situation must come from national institutions and politicians through the debate among them, but also with the other levels of elected representatives. But those problems challenge the EU as a whole. What must be done at the EU level? And how the Committee of the Regions can strengthen its role to improve the participation and influence of the local and regional authorities in this task. The EU, in my view, must be coherent with the values and principles enshrined in our treaties. The Conference of the Future of Europe provides an excellent opportunity to turn our ambitions into results. And for the EU policies to increase their effectiveness, tackling those challenges, will be crucial to better associate local and regional authorities to the EU decision-making process on those issues. This association must work in both directions, bottom-up and top-down. Bottom-up, through strengthening the capacity of the Committee of the Regions for its participation in consultations with EU institutions. More importantly, when it comes to discuss and adopt strategies and decisions in areas where the competence of regions and local authorities are stronger. I am thinking in areas such as education, including formation providing digital skills, active labor market policies, access to public services and social benefits, and the exchange of best practices and the possibility to carry out pilot experiences to improve the functioning of democracy. And top-down, the Committee of the Regions requires our Conference for the Future of Europe to encourage the EU institutions to using the experience and close contacts of local and regional governments with the social sectors suffering most from social and political exclusion. This means cooperation to organize pilot experiences, exchange of best practices that must be very useful to better design and fine-tune the EU proposals at the European level and indeed at the national level also. For the EU to become closer to our citizens, this cooperation seems to me quite relevant, and I think one, in my personal view, but I hope also in the high-level group final opinion sent to your committee, I hope that the committee will be very active, asking the whole Conference for the Future of Europe to take into account those issues. Thank you very much, and I remain at your disposal for the discussion. Thank you.
Grazie, grazie.
Thank you very much indeed. A very many heartfelt thanks for this very prestigious statement from Mr. Almunia. And I'd like to give the floor to Leonie Martin, who's the president of the Young European Federalists. You also have 8 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation. Being here, I understand now also the specific honor. From what I understand, this is the first physical meeting you are having, and I can tell in the room that it's a very special occasion. My name is Leonie. I represent the Young European Federalists, a non-partisan political youth organization. And we have been very active around the conference with our members on the online platform, with different events and activities. When I was thinking about the title of your topical debates, I was more thinking of what precisely does it mean, what equalities have not been achieved, and what should we strive for. Jeff supports basically all different kind of initiatives to strive for equality. In the end, we live in a democracy, and democracy means that we support the voice of the minorities, especially when there's a different majority as such. And we have submitted different ideas to the online platform that I wanted to highlight to you. There are some that more go into the direction of equality as such. One of which I think is the most crucial one, that's the rule of law. I can tell you that when speaking with our members, but also when speaking with young participants in our project, like I have the past few days, young people believe in the future of Europe, but they're also disappointed with the state of democracy across the continent, and are also disappointed with what Europe is doing in that regard. Can Europe do something? Why is it not doing anything? Why are people not talking necessarily about this? And this includes also citizens, specifically includes citizens who live in these countries where the rule of law is being threatened. So one of the ideas that we have uploaded to the online platform that is also enjoying support is on the rule of law, protecting our fundamental values, mechanism on democracy, rule of law, and fundamental rights. As you might be aware, there's the idea floating around that there should be a mechanism basically where these tools are better incorporated in the European Union. In the end, the idea of the EU is a union of values, and I think we've heard this already by the previous speaker, and it has been harmed in recent years. And the conference as such is a necessary opportunity for us to commit ourselves to the rule of law, mechanism, and on fundamental rights, to protect the rights of anyone, in particular the minorities. We're hoping essentially with the conference that we are able to attract a bigger public attention on the issue, that we can also show how citizens are in favor of the mechanism as such, how they are deeming democracy basically as democracy and rule of law as an important thing to achieve equality. The second idea that I want to highlight is leaving no one behind, to create minimum EU social standards. I think this fits very nicely with the previous speaker as well. Here it's about reducing poverty and inequalities, creating adequate social protection, and harmonizing social standards. And in this regard, we're also organizing social media actions, but it's also a topic that appears quite often in the youth consultations that we are organizing. The third idea, and this is basically providing a different angle perhaps to your topical debate, is there's also the issue of equality when it comes to democracy, European democracy as such. How can we speak, for instance, of equality when European citizens vote very differently in European elections? Equality, I mean, we have basically citizens that in one country can vote by mail ballots. We have citizens who can go to an embassy if they live somewhere else. And we have citizens who can only vote in the mailing studio as such. That is something that needs to, especially with European elections, needs to be changed. If we can talk about creating or reforming the European electoral law, I think that's also one way to establish equality. It should be that we have common standards in Europe, how we vote in a European way, but also that we discover a way how we can organize European elections in a European way. So in the end, we're striving for equality for all, hopefully in a conference that is for all. I think that aspect is also important to underline. Not everyone is participating in the conference. I was observing the citizens panel specifically last weekend on democracy, and there was one participant who was actually asking about, how have we been selected, pointing out a lack of diversity in this regard. And I think that's also crucial to point out. And this is bringing me to my last point. That I'm very happy to have this, to be part of this discussion here at the Committee of the Regions, because I think you are actually crucial in making the conference a success. Quite often people talk about, the EU or Europe being Brussels or Strasbourg, and I actually fully disagree with that. I think Europe is everywhere where we are in Europe. And you as mandate holders or as representatives of regional authorities, local authorities, you are able to bring the discussion on what does it mean for us to be part of Europe, how are we contributing to European democracy. And in this regard, I hope, I encourage you to make this your conference in the end, and to organize events, to organize different outreach campaigns with as many people as possible, with I don't like the phrase as such, but not the usual crowds, but fully reaching out to as many people living in your town or region as possible, to have a debate as accessible as possible, so that we actually have an entire continent discussing the future of Europe. I can assure you that Jeff, as a non-governmental organization, but I'm sure also other youth civil society actors, we're very happy to work with you in this regard. I mean, Jeff, for instance, we have 250 local sections, so we might also be there where you are. And it would be great to work together in this regard. But yes, I'd be very happy, for you again. You have a crucial role in this. You also carry a responsibility in making this a conference, because in the end, I think there are quite some actors who already work in the conference. But if no one's paying attention to it, or if only a few people participate in it, then it's not going to be the success that other people are hoping for. I think even worse, the people that are participating currently in it, they're very dedicated European citizens, and they have put their hopes basically in the conference and making this a change. And I fear that they will be very disappointed if there is no proper follow-up with this, if there's no proper engagement also from your side, but also your member state side in this one. Thank you very much.
Grazie di cuore.
Very many thanks indeed, Ms. Martin, for this very impassioned plea. And this is very stimulating both for our Commission and for the Committee of the Regions. Now, as you all know, the Committee of the Regions has done a great deal of important work on the subject of equality, and in particular on the 5 files which make up the EU priority on ensuring a union of equality. And given that today we've invited our colleague Concepcion Andreu Rodriguez, who is the president of the regional government of La Rioja in Spain, and she is also the Committee of the Regions rapporteur on the topic of a union of equality, gender equality strategy 2020 to 2025, to give us a first reaction to the discussion. President Concepcion, I would like to invite you to take the floor for 6 minutes.
Queridos colegas, querido Joaquín.
Dear colleagues, dear Joaquin, I think that you also have the Rioja flag very close to you. Let me start by thanking the President of the Commission, of the CIVEX Commission, for inviting me to take the floor at today's discussion. And I think that this is very important because equality and democracy are the building blocks of my own political commitment. When I was invested as the President of La Rioja, a little over 2 years ago, I undertook with my region to ensure that we could bring about changes which will be based on equality in its broadest possible sense, equality before the law in the area of justice, as well as ensuring equal rights and equal opportunities. The principle of equality is part and parcel of my own personal and professional education, as well as my civic background. And of course, as elected representatives, we have to listen to what our citizens have to say and bring their concerns about inequalities to the Conference of Europe. And I'm speaking here about economic, social and digital inequalities, as well as environmental inequalities and inequalities from region to region. But we also have to look at individual inequalities because we have to realize that individual inequalities still exist. One of my favorite articles in the 1978 Spanish Constitution is its Article 14, which says that all Spaniards are equal before the law without any discrimination for reasons due to sex, religion, birth, opinion, or any other personal condition or social circumstance. And that is very much in line with the first article of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And I would like to dwell on this point to emphasize that the role of democracy is to defend the principle of equality with all of the tools at its disposal. And first and foremost, by means of its laws. We have to ensure that all citizens are defended and that they should all have their rights based on the principle of equality. And that is why we have to ensure that laws are made by the same persons as to those to whom they should apply. And we have seen this by means of elected representatives in our legislative assemblies, which are made up of the men and women of Europe. We are, however, not represented on equal basis because women only represent 15% amongst the mayors of Europe. We do represent 40% in the European Parliament, but we're fewer than that in the Committee of the Regions, and that is why in Europe for many years now we have lived in a democracy whereby the laws that were proposed and adopted by legislative assemblies which were male in their majority. But we now have to ensure that women are better represented, and that is why I'm particularly pleased to see that gender parity and the participation of the young represent key elements in the makeup of the Conference on the Future of Europe. Equality is a cornerstone of our democracies, and that is why I would like to underscore an idea which I think we as local and regional authorities have a very role to play. We have to ensure that when we speak about gender today, it is key to ensure that we focus our discussion on the current moment, the current health pandemic, social media and conflicts have only served to emphasize existing inequalities, but more than that, they have only served to aggravate existing inequalities. We have seen growing violence against women, and that is why in Europe we have to ensure that we work in favor of equality and against gender violence. In La Rioja, we are convinced that it is of key importance to promote such legislation, and we shall be shortly passing a bill in that respect, and that will form the basis for a truly egalitarian society based on the principle of democracy, where men and women will enjoy the same rights. La Rioja is the only region in Spain which does not yet have a specific law on gender equality, but we will soon have it, and in At the same time, we need to increase awareness, particularly in the area of employment. Then secondly, we have to ensure that we can encourage young people to play an active role in bringing about a change and promoting equality, both on a personal and professional basis. And given that we as authorities have a key role to play whilst trying to boost awareness and information, we have to educate and train young people so that they are in a position to ensure that they can help us construct a truly egalitarian Europe. We work together with young people in La Rioja, and we are doing this under the auspices of a conference to discuss with them problems which are due to gender-based violence. In conclusion, no one can remain outside the discussion process which was initiated in the conference, and that is certainly true of women. We as women have to be present in the construction of Europe, and we have to have our voices heard on the discussions on the future. We have to work together to militate in favour of equality, because we are all responsible, as the President of the European Commission said in her last speech on the State of the Union. Society is based on a democracy, and shared values are based on stable fundaments, and I have the greatest of trust in persons, because that will help us to see the emergence of new ideas. That is what will bring about a change and help us to overcome injustice. Thank you very much.
Grazie di cuore, Presidente.
Thank you very much indeed, President Andreu, for this very exciting speech. I'd like to give the floor to a number of speakers who would like to speak 2 minutes each. Let me start by Barbara Hegedus from the EPP.
Dear President, in my opinion, to promote the inclusive democracy and the social participation, the local and regional authorities should concentrate more on the next generation. At local level, we have to offer spaces to unleash the untapped potential, to recall the city as their own and creating a stronger sense of belonging. Veszprém is the only Hungarian city that is now applying for the title of the European Youth Capital in 2024. During the proposal period, we realized that we must focus on that the youth of the city enjoy equal opportunities and help them to participate fully in public life, feeling safe and free from fear of any kind of discrimination. As a result of workshops and surveys, they made it as clear that they have strong opinion about the city, the participation in the decision making, and what are the most important questions for them. I think the conference on the future of Europe must find a way to the next generation. We have to create opportunities more actively and on a bigger scale, provide more encouragement, be more inclusive, and openly inviting for the youth, informal structures of the youth participation in democratic processes, and on a more abstract level to the municipal mindset too. Thank you very much.
Grazie Barbara, grazie di cuore.
Thank you very much indeed, Barbara. I'd now like to give the floor to our colleague Sir Joseph, and perhaps Loredana could be prepared to speak after.
President, dear colleagues, democracy without inclusiveness and equality of opportunities is not real democracy, we know. But we all know that equality of opportunities is not something that is taken for granted in our societies. Equal societies can only be achieved by addressing the problems which lead to inequalities in our societies, and that requires much more courage, dialogue, and comprehensive and complex policy solutions. We need to focus to reaching out to people from different societal groups and empowering them through cooperation with different levels of government, education system, civil society, media, communities, etc. And that it is where we have that thin line between positive action and positive discrimination. Positive discrimination, which is should be very near to identity politics. And the rule of identity politics kills the regular politics and free way for the extremist, for instance. Positive action is different from positive discrimination in that it doesn't negatively impact other groups. So positive action and empowerment and not positive discrimination usually. Let's all work together to make the real difference. Thank you.
Grazie di cuore, Joseph. La parola a Loredana.
Loredana Capone, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Joseph.
Ms. Capone, your microphone is open. Please click on the speak button and it will turn from blue to red. Thank you.
Si prepari Mario Guarente.
Okay, Mario Guarente.
Mr. Guarente, you have the floor. Please click on your speak button. Thank you.
Grazie Presidente.
Yes, thank you very much indeed, President. I'd like to bid all participants and colleagues a very warm welcome and thank them for participating in this debate, which is at the heart of our group, the ECR. The ECR feels that the Committee of the Regions has a key role to play in ensuring the rights of all individuals, including those in particular with disabilities. The Committee of the Regions' opinion on the strategy for persons with disabilities invites the Commission to ensure voting rights for all persons with disabilities in order to eliminate any type of barrier to exercising their rights and to help them to ensure that they can be given employment rights. In order to do that, we need to ensure full social integration and inclusion to ensure that everyone can benefit, including persons with disabilities. To do this, we needed to have certain programs of assistance and support to companies to help them to take on staff members who have disabilities. No one should be left behind, and persons with disabilities should be given greater opportunities in terms of both education and training, as well as work opportunities to ensure that they can develop to the full of their capacities. Local and regional authorities also have a role to play in ensuring autonomous work and boosting entrepreneurship for persons with disabilities. Let me stress once again that this is a point which will be one of the main points to be dealt with in an opinion to be drawn up by my colleague, whom I'd like to welcome here today, and which will focus on the strategy for ensuring the rights of persons with disabilities with a view to the new programme 2021 to 30.
Mario,
Thank you very much indeed, Mario. Let's see whether Loredana Capone is now able to take the floor. If so, please do take the floor. You're from the Socialist Group.
Ms. Loredana, you have your microphone connected. Please click on your speak button and it will turn from very good. Thank you.
Ok, mi sentite?
sì.
Sì, ok, grazie.
Yes, splendid. Thank you very much indeed. I would just like to pay my compliments to everyone for this discussion. We in the Puglia region are working particularly on equal rights for all, equality, to ensure that we can all enjoy the same opportunities, and this applies particularly to women. Basically, we have looked at the situation and we see that there is, of course, a need to ensure that women can play a full role, and that was not the case even in the Constitution of Italy, even in the articles which dealt with equal pay for equal work. So we've gone through these rights to see whether they are being applied. both in private and in public firms. And when we've done this, we have to ensure that those companies who are promoting equal pay should be given certain incentives, certain breaks. And we also have to ensure that all companies can be placed in a position to ensure that if they were to not break, to not comply with the rules, they would not be given contracts under public procurement. So we have always concentrated on this point in our agenda. It's very difficult to bring about an alliance amongst all of the different groups present on the council. But once we do have agreement, there's a great deal of satisfaction to see that it is possible for us to have women on board in discussing their rights. And this is a point which I think is of interest and relevance to us all. And at the end of the day, we even had men as the spokespersons for ensuring equal rights and opportunities. When we speak about European citizenship, we cannot sideline the need to ensure that we have equal rights and citizenship for each and every individual in all of the regions of Europe. Following the approval of our law in a neighbouring region, the same problem occurred. And in fact, I'm sure this holds true of Italy and its entirety, and not just Italy, but other regions in Europe. And there was a popular movement, an association which emerged calling for this region to pass a bill which would ensure that equality could be enshrined in law. Thank you very much indeed. That was what I wished to bring to your attention. Yes, thank you very much indeed, Loredana. Carl van Leeuwen from the European Alliance. And Nina Reitland, would you like to take the floor after him? Yes, thank you very much indeed, President and colleagues. Let me start by thanking our invited guests, our speakers, for setting the scene for today. I think that it is of the utmost importance to ensure that the Conference on the Future of Europe focuses on democratic rights and equality, which is one of the fundamentals of the European Union. More than ever, we have to create added value for both the people of Europe and for our undertakings. Before we look at the extension of the single market, we have to concentrate on ensuring well-being, and well-being depends on equality for all of our citizens. I'm very glad to see that the European Union is returning to its basic principles. We need to follow the principle of subsidiarity to strengthen the action where it is most effective. The decisions are taken should be taken at a level closest to our citizens, and of course that therefore means that the Union has to take into account the role played by not just member states but regions and parts of regions, because that is very often where there are inequalities, and that is why we have to carry out the checks on inequalities and equality in these regions. That is certainly the case in Flanders, my home state, and that is the best way in which we can ensure that we can bridge the gap between the European Union and its citizens. The Conference on the Future of Europe marks a moment when we can hope to make real progress. It is now 2 years since our British friends regrettably left us, and we hope that the time has now come to create a better and a more effective Europe. Thank you very much.
Grazie a te, Carl. La parola.
Thank you very much indeed, Carl. I'd now like to give the floor to Nina Reitland from the Green.
Kiitos, presidentti.
Thank you very much, President. Dear colleagues, and thanks for all the speakers. It's very important to see that the local and regional authorities bring about diversity in the decision making. It's important that local people, individuals, see people like them in the decision making forums. For instance, anonymous recruiting is a very clear way, for instance, in Finland, to bring this about. Also, information campaigning is very important to bring about the idea of diversity. And of course, we know that many citizens want to participate in their community decision making, and this should be possible. In our document, we talk about feeling safe and feeling free from any kind of discrimination. This is very important because if a person has to be afraid because of something that he or she stands for, then that is a great burden for that person to express themselves. We have to see local authorities being strong in defending human rights and breaking down barriers that try to discriminate against minority groups in the society. This is all connected to what we have to fix, what we have to repair in the society so that individuals have the possibility to participate. And then perhaps another threat that I want to flag here. Our committee has discussed mis- and disinformation spreading in the internet, which takes away the basis of democracy. On local and regional level, we can invest in real, true information, media literacy and education. But this is not enough, because this all requires multinational activity across the borders. So I think that we have to start this work to prevent misinformation from spreading already in the European Parliament and in the European Commission, because this type of information is very detrimental, especially to minorities and against women. So these types of new threats we have to be able to combat against. So this is something I wanted to talk about on behalf of the Green Group. Thank you very much.
Grazie di cuore. Vediamo se ci sono.
Thank you very much indeed. Let me just ask whether our two speakers, Mr. Almunia and Ms. Martin, would like to react. I'd like to thank all of our colleagues for their input into the debate. Mr. Almunia, would you like to give any brief comments?
Yes, President. Thank you very much. A few comments. I will agree with most of the opinions.
Señor Almunia, se ha cortado su intervención.
Mr. Almunia, you've been cut off. Perhaps you could press the speak button again.
Yes. So, a couple of comments, positive comments. First of all, Leonie mentioned the need to eliminate barriers to access or difficulties for the participation in the electoral processes around Europe, and in particular, it's especially worrying the low level of participation in many member states in the European elections. The European Parliament is very important, has a lot of power, a lot of possibilities to change legislation, to support rights, to support social measures, and it's a pity that in some member states the turnout in these elections is very low. And I think for the Conference of the Future of Europe is one of the elements that needs to be thought. Second point, I will underline what my friend and colleague Concha Andreu, the chairwoman of Rioja, said regarding the need to educate in equality. We live in a society where some fragmentation has been growing in the last years, some opinions rejecting those who are different, those who are not born or were not born in Europe, those who have another kind of preferences for their lives. And education around equality, around the value of equality, I think is extremely relevant, and I think the EU should push in favor of this. And last, in the intervention of the last speaker, it's very important to think how the EU can react quickly to this disinformation through internet, through social networks, with fake news and all these things that we know and that are very, very dangerous for the good development of a democratic debate, for pluralism, and for policies and political decisions based on facts and not on fakes. And I think these are the three ideas that I took a good note to my reflections as a member of the high-level group. Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you very much indeed. Leonie Martin, would you like to take the floor and respond?
Thank you, Mr. Bianco. Thank you for the members of the committee for their contributions. Yes, there are some points I just want to take up on the issue of gender equality. I think this is it's great that you're highlighting this. As I've been mentioning, as I've been talking about participation beforehand already, in the conference, I just want to highlight that also the participation in the conference is showing gender inequality. I think if you have a read of the interim report sent on the conference on the future of Europe, we can see that I think active participation of the online platform is only by 70%. 70% of the participants are male, whereas only 30% of people participating on the online platform are female. This is already an issue we need to actively tackle and invite women or people identifying with a different gender to actively shape the future of Europe, identify reasons why they are not participating in the conference and how we can facilitate basically their participation. Is it that they are busy with other important work, for instance? Then I generally want to note that I'm very happy. I can hear that you want to take up the role as regional authorities, regional mandate holders, to facilitate the access of citizens towards the conference. Again, let me just underline, civil society is very happy to work with you on this one. And on the issue of education, I mean, I would not be a representative of a youth organization if I would not take up this point. Indeed, the financial crisis has had a big effect on the young generation. Equally, I mean, representing youth civil society. Likewise, if you are worried about money and if you are trying to find a job, you are not going to volunteer, understandably. So it is shaping my generation. I've graduated from high school in 2009, right in the middle of the financial crisis. And now it's shaping also the next generation who are about to now finish high school. So I just want to underline that investments in education there is really important. On the matter of civic education, we as DEF, we have a Europe at School program, for instance. And I think this is also important to highlight. In the past few years, as we are trying to explain how Europe works and what Europe is, and that it's absolutely fine that we have neighboring states, for instance, we notice that more and more people understand less also of the democratic system and what it means for them to be citizens as such. And if you do not understand how to vote, then it will be more difficult to also understand why you should vote on a European level. So now we're diving a bit more in human rights education, but also media literacy. So I think these are important points, and it's great that you're mentioning them. I think there are so many things, so many aspects that we need to tackle together in Europe to kind of make it a better society for the next generations. The conference on the future of Europe, regardless of how it is shaped at the moment and how it can be improved, I think is the opportunity to actually discuss it all together. Thank you very much.
Grazie, grazie di cuore.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to extend my warmest thanks to both our guest speakers and the members of the Commission who made a contribution to the discussion. And before we move on to the next agenda item, I'd like to just underscore that this conference does represent a unique opportunity, offering the citizens of Europe a chance to discuss the challenges and the priorities of Europe. So this means that a great deal is at stake. The Committee of the Regions is represented by a delegation at this conference, and that is why all of the members of the committee will be able to express their thoughts and ideas on this conference of such relevance to Europe as a whole and to our local and regional authorities, given that the members of the COR are encouraged to create a profile on the multilingual platform for the conference where they will be able to share their views. Their views will then be published, collated and published during the course of the conference. So let me encourage you all to be very active on this platform. I have informed the Secretariat that they should be in touch with the ideas of which you will publish on the platform. And in addition, as you know, the CDR is supporting the organisation of a significant number of events at local and regional level, also at cross-border and transnational level, which will take place between now and the end of the year. We hope that this will feed into our discussions here in CIVEX and also will be of relevance to the plenary of the conference. Now, of course, the Committee of the Regions will keep you informed on a regular basis as regards the progress which we are making in our work in the conference. A presentation of the digital platform is available to you on the members portal, and you can also find not just information in English but in all of the languages of the European Union on this members portal. There's also a brief video in English which will show you the main features of this portal, and let's now launch the video.
Grazie. Possiamo adesso passare.
Thank you very much indeed. I would suggest that we now pass on to point 8 of our agenda. And this is the point which is entitled Supporting EU Cities and Regions by Funding Inclusive Communities Through the New MFF. There's a brief 1-minute video. Perhaps you could show that now, please.
colleghi, siamo...
I think we're all aware, colleagues, that under the partnership and integration, there is a decisive issue which will dictate the future of our cities and regions in the European Union. Under the partnership and integration, which was concluded in March between the Committee of the Regions and the European Commission, our institutions have made a commitment to pursue several objectives related to integration, one of them being capacity building for local and regional authorities within the context of the Committee of the Regions, Cities and Regions for the Integration of Migrants. The aims of our partnership are guided by the Action Plan on Integration and Inclusion, the programme from 2021 to 27, which provides for increased opportunities for financing member states' cross-cutting actions in the areas of integration and inclusion under the multi-annual financial framework 2021 to 27. Now, given the wide range of funding instruments available for integration and inclusion projects under this new MFF, it's crucial that we help the members of the Committee of the Regions, as well as the members of our cities and regions for the integration of migrants network, to get access to these specific funds by providing them with detailed information. I would therefore like to thank the policy experts from the European Commission who joined us for our afternoon meeting and who will give us an overview of the funds available to them to see how these funds helped to finance real-life actual projects. We will also hear today from a number of the members of the Committee of the Regions who will present projects which they have implemented in their cities with the help of European Union funds and about the strategy which they have developed for this purpose. You will find a background note on this issue in your respective folders. Let me start by giving the floor to Francesco Fusaro. He is a policy officer in charge of the Legal Pathways and Integration Unit in the European Commission's Directorate General for Migration and Home Affairs, and he will introduce us to the scope covered by the Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund. You have the floor, Mr. Fusaro. Please be so kind as to speak for 6 minutes.
Grazie Presidente. Dear President, honorable members of the committee, for me it's a pleasure to be here to represent the Commission. I have some slides, and today, in the time allowed, I will present the action plan for integration and inclusion and one of the funds supporting the integration. So integration at EU level, and here a word of caution, we're talking about integration of third country national of non-EU migrants. The legal basis is the Article 79 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, where it says Council and Parliament may establish measures to provide incentives and support for the action of member states with the view of promoting integration of third country national residing legally in their territories, excluding any harmonization of laws and regulations. Integration, for the work we have done, is a two-way process, so it's a mutual accommodation of migrants and of member states. We have had the new action plan issued in November 2020. The action plan is aligned with the funding process. So it's a 7-year action plan. It contains 60 actions of what the Commission will do and the recommendation for member states. One of our actions is the partnership with the Committee of Regions. One of our goals is to have a strong focus to support local communities. It is there that integration happens. So please, the previous slide, if possible. The action plan is divided in 4 horizontal sectoral priorities, which are education, employment, health, and housing. I will not talk about this today, but on 2 of the 5 horizontal priorities, which is building strong partnership, increasing EU funding, fostering participation are the others, enhance the use of digital tools and monitoring the process of our policy. So when it comes to building strong partnership, one of the things the Commission has done is indeed to increase the cooperation with the Committee of the Regions, with the partnership, also with the creation of a urban academy. It works also with the social economic partners, national authorities, so representative of the Ministry of Member States, the host communities and the civil society. The event today is the result of the excellent cooperation the Commission has had with the Committee of the Regions. The goal for us is to have a regular exchange with the committees and also with the other local and regional authorities, but also build and promoting exchange of experience, improve evidence and data on integration and local level. If the health situation allows, we will also relaunch in 2022 the Urban Academy for Integration, which is a training program for policymakers and practitioners from cities and regions in the field of integration. The previous edition had 100 cities and regions involved. And then the other element I would like to mention today to open the discussion on is the increased funding for integration. Today I will talk about, next slide please, I will talk about the AMIF, which is the Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund, but there are other funds my colleague will talk about today and their contribution to the integration of third country nationals. What we have seen in these funds are the way in which the Commission contributes and supports the integration. What we have seen in the process of approval of this funding, these are regulations that have been adopted, has been the synergies we have tried to create between the funds and hope that in the implementation we'll be able to see it. So for this reason, for example, the Commission will launch a toolkit for the use of the EU funds, but also will try to launch seminars to promote the access to funds to local and regional authorities. So when it comes to the AMIF for 2021-2027, AMIF is the Asylum Migration Integration Fund, there is an envelope of about 10 billion, of which 64% is done through shared management, what is called shared management. It's a budget that from the EU budget goes to and is managed by the Commission along in shared way with national authorities. And another part, which is the 36% that is managed directly by the Commission, usually through transnational action. What the news on this fund is that the participation, the co-financing rate where local and regional authorities participate goes up to 90% from the 75% of the previous period. And also that when the Commission will manage that 36% of funds, we'll have to dedicate, when it comes to integration, at least 5% of the integration to the allocation to local and regional authorities. So in the next slide, I will just present the AMIF that goes a bit beyond the integration, because the objectives are to strengthen and develop the common European asylum system, but as a second objective there is the strengthening and developing the legal migration, promote integration and social inclusion of third country nationals. The other objectives are counter irregular migration and enhancing return, and the last one, enhance solidarity. So when it comes to the action that can be supported from the AMIF, if we will go, thank you very much, are the integration strategies that can be taken at national level or local level, support local and regional authorities with integration, training the staff, training the third country national when it comes to language learning or civic orientation course, and provide other services. But the AMIF will be limited, and I arrived to the last slide, will be limited to what are the early stages of integration. For the rest, and this is what we have tried to do in the Commission, intervention or more long-term can be funded under the European Regional Development Fund and the ESF+. This is all from my side. I'm once again very happy to be here, and I'll be available for any question. Thank you very much.
Grazie di cuore, signor Fusaro.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Fusaro. I'd now like to give the floor, as I said, when we discuss point 5 of the agenda, I'd like to give the floor to Juan Calabug-Rolo, who is the Regional Secretary for the European Union and External Relations of Valencia, to share with us his region's strategy on migration 2021, and he'll explain to us how he used the funds to implement this strategy. Mr. Calabug-Rolo, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Muy bien, pues muchas gracias, Presidente.
Thank you very much indeed, President. And let me start by saying that in our region, we do have a very direct approach, and the strategies which we apply are essential to ensure that we can be forward-looking and act before any events occur. And given the fact that our region is closer to Algeria than Madrid, you can imagine that on occasion we do see traumatic events unfolding with people who come to look for a better life in our country. Unfortunately, all too many of them perish in the Mediterranean before they reach our shores. We have had terrible experiences in 2018 because the vessel Aquarius was crisscrossing the Mediterranean for weeks, and then luckily was able to berth in Valencia, and we were able to welcome the migrants on board. So what does our strategy entail? What we wish to follow is an integrated approach to the reality of events unfolding, and it's based on human beings and human rights in order to guarantee the human rights of the migrant population, to ensure that they can have access to public services, and that we can respond to xenophobia, racism and hate speech, and counter that. I think it's quite clear that this is one of the main points underpinning our strategy. We have to have common values to ensure that all of the departments of our regional government, because as you know, in Spain, the regions have very broad competences in the areas of health, social assistance and education. And since we have such a key role to play, we have to coordinate our effort. What we therefore did was to ensure that all of the government efforts were coordinated, and in addition we followed a participatory approach, bringing together the NGOs working in the area of migrants and refugees, as well as associations representing migrants themselves. And we tried to ensure that we could follow a unified approach. We have also at all points tried to ensure that we could guarantee the human rights and the dignity for all migrants. All of the migrants in our region have access to the public health service. At the same time, we also try to ensure that all of the migrant children and young people are integrated into our educational system. We furthermore try to facilitate their access both to jobs and to proper housing. This is all based on multiculturality and participatory approach in our authority. We also have a number of specific plans, such as the Valencian strategy for the equality and the inclusion of the gypsy population, which also has its own specific characteristics. In our global strategy, we have to look firstly at health, at housing. Employment, of course, is essential, as was said in the previous debate. We also have to fight against fake news, hate speech, and we also try to ensure that this is accompanied by an effort to ensure ongoing cooperation with Africa. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Galabui-Rul. It's now my pleasure to welcome Mrs. Petra Hoek, who's the director of the International Catholic Migration Commission in Europe and the SHARE network, who will share with us the benefit of her expertise and experience when it comes to community sponsorship programs and the links which she has to the funding available for this purpose. You have the floor for 3 minutes, please.
Yes, many thanks to the President and the members of the committee for inviting us to be here on behalf of the SHARE network, which is a network that has been developing since 2012 with around 4,000 stakeholders, above all local communities. I wanted to talk a little bit about our experiences with AMIF funding, and particularly in the area of community sponsorships. We have two axes of our work. Like I said, we have a wide variety of stakeholders now in 27 member states, and are looking at two things: safe pathways, that includes resettlement and complementary pathways, as well as another program on local integration and inclusive territories, where we look at territorial approaches in rural territories. Talking about our work in sponsorships, we have been very happy to be developing quite a lot of research. I have taken some of our publications here for those present. I'm so happy to see that really people are here live. And we work with Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, Ireland, Spain, and the UK, and very happy for Spain to partner with Basque Country, the region that has developed the first regional pilot in Europe for sponsorship under the resettlement program. What do? We look at the particularly the early integration phase and see how volunteers and other local communities can develop first early integration for the families that arrive. Maybe next slide, please. So what we do is we carry out mapping and contextualize best practices, of course, in a multi-level governance competence, which is very important in the area of resettlement and complementary pathways. Of course, the national state being responsible for the selection and admission to the territories. A vital strategy that we have is to organize multi-stakeholder engagement and getting different actors together to look at targeted solutions. And particularly in the one in rural territories, we focus on space, particularly NUTS 3 levels, to look at inclusive strategies that look at wider integration. If I can just be very quick, going back to the Basque Country model, for example, to make things a bit more concrete. Engaging cities and regions is one of the most important areas of further expanding community sponsorships across Europe. How can that be done? I think that the Basque model is a very interesting one. That's a partnership where the Basque Country engages with financing for housing, supports volunteer networks, and ensures that they can pay for coordination and for quality control. And then we have civil society that coordinates the volunteer groups that support the refugees that arrive under these programs. So an example is You see that here. So we have 90 persons. This is an example of how I would like to see it in the future. 19 persons for 2022. You have a coordinating network, then you have the different regions that then can all support a number of families, then supported by an overall framework of training, mutual learning, quality control and financial engineering. In that respect also, and I don't want to take too much of your time, I think that the AMIF will certainly offer possibilities to put this type of programs under a national umbrella so that you can have more economies of scale and that the partners can be learning from each other. In terms of the union actions, we have been very privileged to work that under the share network, opportunities and challenges. I don't want to take too much of your time. I think the union actions really have given an enormous opportunity to address the main integration action plan issues. I speak above all about the resettlement, the complementary pathways. Building platforms for exchange, exploring best practices. And what we have seen that many of our European projects have fed into national programs under the national AMIF, so that allowed for scaling up. Of course, there are challenges. The priorities change relatively often, and sometimes many projects are funded at the same time, which makes it a bit of an overkill sometimes. The implementation periods are short. The financial regulations, as you know, are complex to handle and not always easy to adapt flexibly to changing circumstances. Then we also note heavy coordination and management requirements and limited core funding for network and ongoing initiatives. So every time, of course, it is difficult to have a continued engagement in that way of funding. Overall, I think that our experiences are extremely positive, and we welcome you for further questions, and thank you for your attention.
Grazie. Grazie.
Thank you very much indeed, Mrs. Hook. I'd now like to welcome Ottilia Giurbano, who is a policy assistant at the Inclusive Growth, Urban and Territorial Development Unit in the Commission's Directorate General for Regional and Urban Policy. I'd like to ask you to take the floor and present to us the scope of the ERDF. The floor is yours for 6 minutes at most.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to be here together with my colleagues to present the scope of support of our funds for integration of people with a migrant background. As I mentioned, I'm Ottilia Giurbano. I work in DG Regio, and I will present the scope of support in particular of ERDF, European Regional and Development Fund. We can go to the next slide. I try to structure the presentation in a way that is as useful as possible for you. So, how to access the funds, what are the measures that we support under the ERDF, and what are relevant urban policy initiatives and instruments that you can use in your integration strategies and policies and implementation. We can go to the next slide. So imagine you want to apply for the funds. Where do you need to look? You need to look at the programs and the links in your member states. Because of the principle of shared management, it is at the level of the member state where the implementation of the programs happens. So that is why you have to check what type of call for proposals they are publishing and how you can apply for them. You have there some links on how you can access this managing authorities and national programs in your member state, and also how funds have been used in the 2014-2020 programming period that also relate to integration of people with a migrant background. What is important to mention that now we are in a very important phase, which is the programming and negotiating of the programming documents for the next programming period, so 21-27. And you play a very important role. As you see here quoted, an article from the Common Provisions Regulation, which applies to our funds, emphasizing the role of local, regional, urban authorities in the development of the programs, both in the design of the measures, but also in the implementation in the scope of monitoring committees. So I very much welcome you to make use of the opportunity to be part of this consultation and policy discussions. We can go to the next slide. I don't see it moving, but I can continue in any case. You should be able to see an overview of the specific objectives. One before, please. Yes, perfect. So these are the specific objectives that can be supported by ERDF. I'm not going to go into technical details, but you can see that with our fund, we can support measures in education, employment, housing, health, and social care. You see that third country nationals, including migrants, are mentioned under a specific objective, but we expect that under all the actions that are programmed under Policy Objective 4, that they also take into account how the needs and challenges faced by people with a migrant background are addressed. We can go to the next slide. What does ERDF support? It supports infrastructure, equipment, and access to services in these areas that I mentioned, which are crucial for social inclusion. We expect that through our investments, we are not contributing to segregation and isolation of people with a migrant background, but we are contributing to their inclusion and integration in the society. Just for your information, we have also as a requirement that measures have to be in line with national, regional strategies. And these are very specific on poverty reduction, on how segregation and discrimination is being prevented and combated, and with the specific reference to migrants. And you might be very much familiar also with the territorial instruments of ITI, CLLD, SUD, Sustainable Urban Development, but I come back to this later in a slide. We can go to the next slide, please, where you'll be able to see more in practice what ERDF supports. So in the scope of integration, let's take an example. We support that people with a migrant background are provided social housing in the community. And that children have access to mainstream education, which might mean extending mainstream schools, ensuring buses that children have access to the mainstream schools, but also complementary measures for their parents, for their families, so that they access the labor market, that they access mainstream health care services. We can go to the next slide. Here, it's a brief overview of another policy objective that we have on support for urban and local authorities. You might be familiar with it, and we want to emphasize that also in the scope of the local and territorial development strategies, that integration of people in the migrant background should be included. In order to benefit from this, there are certain requirements which are laid out in our regulation, and this involves, again, the fact that you need to have a partnership with all levels of the government, that measures are complementary, so in all the social inclusion areas that I've mentioned, and that local and territorial bodies are involved in project selection, so it can be very relevant for you. And last slide. Here are some tools you can use. My colleague already mentioned the updated toolkit that we have prepared together with colleagues from DG Home and DG Employment. You might be familiar with the 2018 version. This one, the new one, will be published very soon, and we'll make sure that the link is distributed to you. And there you can see scenarios on all these areas of social inclusion, on how measures can be supported under the different funds in a complementary manner. And there's a special chapter on local authorities and the challenges faced by local authorities. So we very much encourage you to make use of it. And there are other instruments that we have available under the European Urban Initiative. You have the links there. Happy to provide further details afterwards. And I also encourage you to have a look at the study by OECD. It includes a checklist that can support you in developing your integration policy strategy. Thank you very much for your attention. Happy to answer any questions.
Grazie di cuore.
Many thanks indeed, Ms. Giurbano. I think that you've given us a very interesting illustration. I'd now like to move on to a project which has been implemented in Bologna. It's a project which is called SALUS, which stands for Sustainable, Accessible, Livable, Usable Social Space, to promote intercultural well-being, welfare and welcoming. We have the great pleasure to welcome here Mr. Bertocchi, who is specifically charged with running this project. So, Inti Bertocchi, the floor is yours for 3 minutes, please.
Mr. Bertocchi, you have the floor. Very good.
Yes, okay, thank you so much. I must be very quick, so I will start immediately sharing my video. Okay. Okay, good morning. Thank you so much. I'm going to show you very briefly this experience in Bologna. It's a project funded by the UIA, Urban Innovative Actions. We received 5 million euros from the ERDF, and we have been working for 4 years with 17 partners, public and private. There are universities, NGOs, social cooperatives, research institutes, and so on. So it is very well assembled, very articulated partnership. And the goal is the conversion of a space that was abandoned in a new innovative space for the cultural, social, and economic integration of refugees. I show you this is the result of the project. As you can see, there is a new space where there are different facilities. There is a housing building for co-housing where there are refugees, but also Italian families and students and workers. So the refugees are directly involved in all activities. There is a restaurant, there are different laboratories, a theater, a research center with co-working space, and many different types of gardening activities. So now the activities started in temporary buildings, and we are going to finish the final multifunctional building next year. So this is the final layout. What is Salus Space? It's a collaborative space. So the community is made by refugees, 40%, and the other families that have been selected through a public call. So there was a public call for the selection and motivational interviews to make sure the people share the vision and the values. And the inhabitants have to sign a pact for collaborative living and a charter of values, and all collaborate in the management of the activities. So Salus Space is also a permanent space for training where refugees can learn about working in different fields, from restaurants, as you can see, the activities, the gardening, the restaurants, the hotel, because there is also a little hostel. So there are more than 10 people that have been trained so far, but every day there is more activities. And Salus Space is also a creative space for innovation. There is a temporary association for the management, a steering committee with partners, and also the inhabitants, the citizens, and scientific committee, and the community manager and cultural mediators. They have to be to follow the process for the 2 years duration of the experimental management. So it's very briefly description, but as you can see from the previous picture, it is mainly a space for the community where all inhabitants and citizens live together and work together, creating a space for interaction and for collaboration. Thank you so much.
Grazie di cuore e complimenti.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to pay tribute to you for this splendid initiative. I'd now like to give the floor to Marianne Doyen, who is a policy officer at the European Social Fund. under the auspices of the Director General for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion, and she's going to speak to us about the support available under the ESF+. You have the floor for a maximum of 6 minutes.
Many thanks, grazie Presidente. So I represent here the European Commission, DG Employment and Social Affairs. We have recently started programming of our new European Social Fund Plus that will run from 2021 until 2027. And I will present here the key features of this fund. I already thank my colleagues who have introduced some interesting features, and I will just complement their saying. So in terms of the scope, the ESF Plus is the successor of the European Social Fund, and it is very much similar in the sense that it aims to improve employment prospects and levels of all the unemployed and all the inactive across the EU. It is a treaty-based fund, so it's been going on for more than 60 years now, and it is one of the cohesion policy funds. So as such, what my colleague Ottilia just said about shared management also applies, and it's really important, I think, for regional stakeholders to bear in mind when looking for funding. Over the years, the fund has grown from improving employment to also cover social inclusion issues and the contribution to eradicating poverty and just more generally addressing the most vulnerable in our societies, notably for children. In the current context, marked by the pandemic, marked by a need to go towards a greener Europe and a greener world, the ESF Plus will contribute to build the future workforce, build the necessary skills in order to prepare for the transition to a green and digital economy. It has also been amended before being finally adopted in order to cover aspects that were brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. So we have increased support for children, we have increased support for young people, and introduced what we call thematic concentration requirements. Basically, this is a minimum amount of funding for each member state to address those categories of population, so children and youth. In terms of budget, we have 99.3 billion euro for the whole period, and much of this is going to be implemented under shared management with a small part implemented under indirect management, which was and is known as the EASY program, the Employment and Social Innovation Program. I also wrote here the co-financing rates, just so you see that depending on the level of your, the economic levels of the regions, you may benefit from more or less money from the EU. This is common to all the cohesion policy funds. We can go to the next slide, please. This is what the ESF Plus looks like in terms of its architecture and its specific objectives. So we have 13 specific objectives divided into 3 pillars: employment, education and training, and social inclusion. I have highlighted on the right-hand side the specific objective that we introduced in our proposal and that was adopted to promote the socio-economic integration of third country nationals, including migrants. So this was one effort from the Commission to give specific attention to this population. But we can, of course, support this category of the population under any of the specific objectives of the social fund. So I'm just going to take you through this briefly. So the 3 categories of the specific objectives, as I just said. What I want also to say and for you to look at is that we are looking at training, at employment, at improving female labor market participation and work-life balance, improving skills and the education and training system. So we're both working for to fund measures both for people and for systems, training and employment systems, public employment services, training organizations, etc. We're also looking at lifelong learning, anticipating change, and also the needs for new skills. In terms of inclusion, we are looking into active inclusion, so work and inclusion at the same time. We're looking at vulnerable groups such as Roma, marginalized communities, and third country nationals. And there is also, if you look at the right-hand side column, a focus on tackling poverty and social exclusion, and including through material support. This was formerly known as the Fund for European Aid to the Most Deprived, the FEAD. So this has been included into the new ESF+. So this is all now integrated. And I've left some references on the sides for you to look at in case you're interested. And we can move on to the next slide on with a bit more detail on the support to third country nationals and migrants in particular. I would like to start by reminding you that this support does not have to be programmed in terms of ESF programs under this specific objective, but we're expecting the member states, and this is the message that we are sharing with them as they are moving on with programming ESF Plus resources, that this category should be covered widely in the programs and not only under specific measures or specific axes. The support should be both targeted and mainstream. This is really important for us. One thing that is interesting, I think, for you to know is that because the ESF Plus is looking at employment and training measures, we are expecting third country nationals and migrants to have access to the labor market, which requires for them to have a legal status. This is quite an important feature. Although the material aid that we can provide in terms of poverty, for instance, is unconditional and could be delivered to people also without a legal status. I think this is an important difference with AMIF as well, that does not necessarily have the same requirements. In terms of examples of actions that can be funded under the Social Fund Plus, we have all the measures linked to labor market activation, apprenticeships, training and employment, inclusive support, inclusive pathways, counseling, etc. Everything linked to labor market integration and work-based measures. We are also providing support to children in terms of early childhood education and care, inclusive education, non-segregated education, fighting early school leaving, and facilitating transitions to employment and from school. We are also funding services and access to services. One of the speakers before, one of the interventions was about also the respect of human rights, and one other looked at housing services. These are measures that we can support, absolutely. One interesting feature as well is that we've introduced some provisions to enhance social innovation, and this can also concern third country nationals and migrants. For instance, through entrepreneurship, social economy, circular economy, or also migrants themselves starting activities, etc. And accompanying measures to overcome segregation, prejudice, and discrimination, as long as they are related to the labor market. So my last slide is just a slide with useful links, I think, with the regulation, our new ESF Plus website, with many projects as well that you might find interesting, and the publication. And I will stop there, and thank you very much.
Grazie a lei.
Thank you very much indeed, Ms. Doyen. I'm now very happy to extend a welcome to Per Granfalk. He's the mayor of the city of Solna in Sweden. He's a member of the Econ and NAT commissions, and he's also a member of the Committee of the Regions, Cities and Regions for Integration of Migrants Network. Thank you for sharing with us the project which you have implemented in Solna. You have the floor for a maximum of 3 minutes.
Mr. Granfalk, you have the floor. Please click on your speak button. It will turn from blue to red. Thank you. Mr. Gramfork, yes, please click on your speak button. It will turn from blue to red.
Now, you hear me?
Sì, adesso sì.
We can now.
Great.
Thank you.
Something wrong with the speak.
C'è qualche problema di collegamento.
There seems to be a problem connecting with Mr. Granfalk. Let's see whether we get him back.
Mr. Gramfork, please connect yourself using Google Chrome. Are you using Google Chrome? Because I see on the screen you have some microphone issues. Then I invite you please to click on F5 button. That will refresh. And just please be sure to connect with Google Chrome. Thank you. Monsieur le Président, Monsieur Gramfork vient de se déconnecter.
Mr. Granfalk has just disconnected. Perhaps if we wait a few seconds, we'll wait. Otherwise, we'll give the floor to one of those present here in the room to make their contributions if they wish to do so.
Allora, c'è già una richiesta di intervento.
I see there's one request from the floor. The Socialist Group, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, I come from Lithuania, Baltic state, most probably you well aware of, and I will briefly tell you our situation currently. You know, we have a border with Belarus, and there's a guy, Alexander, who names himself a president, but actually he's a fake president, or we consider usually him as a last Europe's dictator. Most probably he's not even the last that we have, but nevertheless that. So what he has decided, or this Belarusian state officials, what he have decided or what he have done during the summer, they created a state agency and started bringing economic migrants from various destinations, of various origins, to Belarus at first. They teach them how to act, what to say while crossing Belarusian-Lithuanian border, and currently we have illegal migrants at a number of 4,000. In my municipality alone, my municipality contains of smaller towns. In one of the towns of 2,000 inhabitants, there are already 700 illegal migrants. And actually, I was really positively surprised with all the speakers present here today, with vast opportunities of how to deal with various both hard and soft integration issues. So, but the key maybe, and I find it very positive, and I thank you for that. It brings me to a situation that in my town, in my region, we will not start from scratch. We're already doing a lot of things in terms of social housing, in terms of education, health issues, and so on and so on. But from regional or my perspective, what I see, even knowing and widening today my knowledge about the possibilities existing already, and that will be still available in a multi-annual financial framework, is that those possibilities existing not to overlap but complement each other. Because usually when you Google or search for information, you might find some pieces of puzzle, but you might not end up seeing the whole picture, the whole what's on the as a possibility. So I congratulate with the toolkit that you're today presented, but I think there's still a lack of information for regions like Lithuania, since Lithuania was never a top destination, was probably for a variety of migrants. The top destinations are Germany, France, Scandinavian countries. So that's to some extent a new thing for Lithuanians, Latvians, Polish colleagues. And another thing that since we already been working, I noted that, it's always, the smooth integration is always about kind of at least two pathway road. You have to work with migrants, but you, at the same time, or at least that's my impression, you have to work with local community. Because in Lithuania, there's still a lot of stereotyping, a lot of threats, and that has to be dealt with. So putting two parties, both migrants, local people that are situated and live locally, together in cultural, sports events, in various soft, let's say, programs, makes the integration smoother. So thank you very much for hearing my insights.
Grazie davvero.
Thank you very much indeed. Let me try once again to connect with our colleague Mr. Granfalk. Are you out there?
Vediamo.
Can't see him.
Che la connessione è proprio data via.
I think the connection has been...
Le président, Monsieur Granfalk.
I'm afraid he's not connected.
Darei la parola al...
In that case, I'd like to give the floor to my colleague.
Ok, prego, collega.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm sure that for the effective inclusion, we do need a place-based, integrated partnership and bottom-up approach. And we do not need to discover America for that, because we do have instruments like CLLD and ITI. I'm very happy that the colleagues from DG Regio and DG Employment have mentioned that. I've been cooperating, and thanks to Marianne Doyen, she was pushing it through the DG Employment in the past, and as a rapporteur of the opinion on CLLD, we have been cooperating. But what's a big pity is that the member states have not been using those instruments in efficient scale, and I'm afraid that even in the future programming period, they are not going to be used in efficient scale. And I would be very happy if us as local and regional authorities would really do as much as possible during the last phase of negotiations on the national level to really use multi-fund CLLD, to really use ITI, because I think those tools are very good for this kind of inclusion. And we do have excellent examples from Sweden, from Austria, from Finland of inclusion, for example, of migrants in rural areas. So thanks to the European Commission, and I would be happy if also the member states would be more innovative in this issue.
Grazie.
Thank you. I don't see any further requests for the floor from the room. So given that, I'd now like to give the floor to the two speakers, the various speakers, to see whether they would like to respond to anything which has been said or make comments, and perhaps I could give them the floor in the order in which they took the floor. So let's then start with our colleague, Mr. Fusaro.
Grazie, Presidente. I have no comment on what I have heard, just to welcome what you have said. The situation in Lithuania is not unknown to the Commission. We have worked in the past on integration, but clearly this is another scale and another issue, and I think also the Commission it's being close to Lithuania in these extremely difficult circumstances. And this involves also, in a practical level, exceptional funding. And I would like here to say something very a bit technical, which is when I made the presentation, said 70% of AMIF goes to about 70% of AMIF goes to member states in shared management, where there is that part of programming, And then there is a 30% that is managed in a flexible way where there are emergency situations, and this is clear an emergency situation, and this is where the Commission will tap in for helping in this case. And then it just to say that I'm very happy when we talked about, and I have heard about cooperation with at multi-level and multi-stakeholder cooperation. It's something we try to do. Clearly, integration comes in a bottom-up way, and of course, we have also used to work with sport clubs for helping in integration also in through sport. Sport, for example, is a way in which you integrate beyond the barriers of a language. So we have been very keen, and in the European Cup, the Commission also partnered with the UEFA for children. When it comes to the role of member states, I also hear what you say. What you have to know is that in the preparation of these funds, the commissioner of our commissioner, so for home affairs, regional affairs, and employment, have written a letter to their homologue in member states, saying that the Commission would have tried to create synergies and complementarities, and then has invited the ministries and, of course, the organization and the authorities that follow up on implementation of the funds, exactly to look for these synergies. And I hope that this will happen. Thank you very much.
Okay, grazie.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Ciobanu, if you'd like to give a brief reply. If not...
Prego.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. I'd like to compliment also what my colleague said, to thank a lot for the interventions. Just quickly, indeed, emphasizing again the important role that you have right now in the programming and discussions on the programming documents, both partnership agreement and programs. As you know, the scope of cohesion policy is to address social, territorial, and economic inequalities, and all the programs have as an essential part the fact that we are addressing the needs, the inequalities. So your contributions are very relevant to show the realities on the ground and the bottom-up issues that you encounter. In terms of the toolkit, indeed, we very much look forward to have it published as soon as possible, because the text is ready, so it's just about publishing details. And indeed, the scope is to show the possible measures under the different funds and their complementarities, so to ease your proposals and also the proposals at the national level for that. And we very much emphasize there, you'll see the capacity building actions, because you mentioned in the case of Lithuania that it's a new experience, a new challenge that you're facing. So there is this support under all the three funds for capacity building, pool of experts, development of strategies, and embedding in national, regional, local strategies, also this angle about integration, because this is another point that I wanted to emphasize, not to have just singular projects, mostly in the hands of NGOs who are struggling and don't have the continuity, to empower the NGOs, to have partnership with them, and to have all of this embedded and aligned with strategies at all different levels and across all relevant policy areas. So when you have the strategy on education, you also take into account how for people with the migrant background measures address their needs and their access to the mainstream services. And I think maybe I mentioned everything that I wanted, but happy to further elaborate. Thank you.
No, basta, abbiamo completato su questo.
Thank you very much indeed for completing the discussion by mentioning this point, and we're all very interested in it. I see now that we now have a connection with our colleague, Mr. Granfalk. I hope it works this time, so perhaps you could take the floor, sir.
Per Granfalk, sindaco della città di Solna.
Mayor of Solna in Sweden.
Mr. Granfalk, you have your microphone connected. Please click on the speak button. It will turn from blue to red. Thank you very much.
Tack för det. Jag ber om ursäkt för...
Thank you. I apologize for the technical problems. I'll quickly tell you about our European Social Fund projects between 2018 and 22. Digital cooperation. It covers 1,100 collaborators. 87% are women, and 77% of these women are born in a different country with another mother tongue than Swedish. Majority of these work within the city of Solna in our activities, in our care for elderly and care for children. These are groups that in the future need to be able to handle digital technique in order to use all the welfare in that area. These are two areas, care for elderly and care for children, where it's a rather simple work task as newly arrived, but in the future it's going to demand a higher knowledge of digitalization and IT. This group often has large failings there. We have supported these employees through screening on their knowledge, on IT knowledge, and create programs in order to train these people within the area they're working. This has increased the use of IT within these working areas. We use IT as a tool in the care of elderly, but also in the care for children. This has also broken their exclusion in these groups, which means that they're quicker integrated in society. They can get information on what's going on around them, and they get more and more employable. And this is very good fitting in the social fund, employability and education. This group has been educated, they are improved the Swedish language, and they are more employable since they know more how to use digital tools in healthcare, care of elderly and care of children. And this is very useful for their employability in the future. Now that we start assessing the project, those who participated say that they use the digital tools and use this in their work and their everyday life. And we can also see that these tools are being used more and more. And according to the participants, this has increased their knowledge of IT in their everyday life and increased their linguistic knowledge. Sometimes it has been difficult for these people to learn Swedish combined with the IT. So this has been a very successful project for Solna town, but also for the employees who have been integrated better in the society. Thank you very much.
Grazie, grazie di cuore.
Thank you very much indeed for your contribution. This then concludes this very interesting discussion on topic of central importance, the work which was done this morning mentioned the work done in Sicily, where we saw a cooperation agreement concluded, which was discussed previously, and this means that at a future meeting of CIVEX we will ask the mayors to report back to us on the cooperation which they have with a number of European cities. I'd like to thank you all very much indeed for your active participation and your interest during the course of the meeting. And in particular, I'd like to thank the speakers for the contribution. So under 9 other business, are there any issues for other business? If there are no contributions under AOB, let's move on to the last item on today's agenda, which is the confirmation of the date of our next meeting of this commission. It's been penciled in for the 16th of November. And you will receive, of course, further information about how the meeting is going to be structured at a later date and about how you're going to be able to participate. I'd like to say that I very much hope that we will have an in-person meeting. Let me once again thank the interpreters for their work. And above all, I'd like to also thank the Secretariat of the CIVEX Commission alongside, of course, all of you. This was a high risk meeting. It's the first time I've chaired this meeting in person, and I hope I've avoided getting anything wrong. So I'd like to thank all of you for your patience. We've even been able to finish this meeting ahead of time, despite the fact that it was a very complex meeting. So thank you all very much indeed. I look forward to seeing you at the next meeting.
Merci. On a fait un excellent travail. Bene, soddisfatto?